Ever wonder why 95% of leads do not convert? Why cold call rates are down and prospects don't open our emails? Why our responses of robocalls and implanting pixels to track user interaction, mostly without permission, is backfiring spectacularly? Well, that's what we intend to find out here in the Buyer Side Chat podcast. There are scores of podcasts about selling, but most miss the shift that has come upon the buying-selling process. The initiative has since moved from the supply to the demand side. The Buyer Side Chat, your podcast of record for B2B buying, talks to actual buyers, persons, not personas, in the quest to understand the real buyer's journey, their trials and tribulations, challenges and outcomes they're striving for. Welcome to the Buyer Side Chat. Thank you for your time and for joining us on this session. I have a favor to ask. While you continue to listen to the podcast, please leave a comment or rating at iTunes or wherever else you get your podcasts from. I personally look at each comment and will give a shout out to each of you in our next episodes. It means a lot to hear from you. Today we have with us Brish Bhan Vaidya, Head of Strategic Sourcing and Supply Chain Asia Pacific, Uber.
When we talk about the risk evaluation, it is the financial risk, it's the commercial risk, it's the technical risk, operational risk, legal risk. All these risks need to be considered when a particular deal is being, evaluated. I mean, just getting a price from someone which is better than other does not help. The concept of total cost of ownership is something which does come into play, which, a seller must know. A seller has to understand that there is a cost of transition also, right, from one supplier to another. So if they think that the buyer is buying something at $100 and I can give, 5% benefit to him, they need to realize to get that 5%, it should not happen that the buyer has to spend additional 10% because there is a transition cost.
Brish Bhan is a certified sourcing, procurement, and source-to-pay leader with over 20 years of global experience across various industries and verticals. He has worked with global majors like Accenture, American Express, British Telecom, and is presently working with Uber. He has played roles in strategic sourcing, consulting, procurement transformation, and procurement operations. Brish Bhan has been awarded Procurement Leader of the Year by Institute of Supply Management in 2018. Now on to this insightful episode with Brish Bhan Vaidya. Brish, welcome to the Buyer Side Chat. I'm delighted to have you and I look forward to a riveting chat today. The first basic question I have to ask is this, that buying process in organizations, how do you see that change in the last 20 years?
Thanks, Shubhanjan. Thanks for inviting me. So I started my career in 2000 and that was the time in India, there was not a single company which was using any sort of, tools and applications for doing sourcing or procurement. Purchase orders were generally issued on either MS Word or over email or on Excel file. So that was the time, right? And I happened to be in the company, which was in fact the first company in India to kind of, start pitching the electronic commerce or B2B commerce, solution to the procurement community. One of the first customer that was acquired that time was Maruti Udyog. And, while they were interested to know what solution can help them, but they were seeing risk in, their process. They were not fully confident, whether it will work or not. So one of the work they gave to us was, while you are here to sell, your solution, which will help me in buying, but can you help me in selling my scrap? If you are able to get, more price for my scrap, that will be a good testimonial that yes, the tool works. So that was quite a challenge because, our tool that time was built for reverse auctions, but with some small configurations, we could, convert that to forward auctions and we helped Maruti in selling their, scrap out of Gurgaon. They were expecting approximately, I think it was around 3.5 crore rupees for their scrap. And when this, forward auction was done, we had to train, the buyers, the regular buyer community that they had, that how they can see price increasing and how they can bid in the system. So we thought that auction will run for half an hour to 1 hour because, people are not trained, so they will do the mistakes and all. But then we saw that enthusiasm between, the buyers there when they started bidding, the last bid we got was almost 2x than what Maruti had the kind of thought. So that was the first thing that I would say was one of the first event that happened, which was an introduction towards the tool and technique. So with that, things started changing in this sourcing community or buying community. The adoption of tools started happening. Initially, it was for private organizations who started adopting it, but later, sometime in 2004 and all, most of the governments in India or the PSUs, they also started adopting those kind of applications. So the basic shift was from a manual process to a system based process. It was sort of a digitization that I would say happened. And I still remember, happened to work with the same company which deployed the first e-governance project in India for government of Andhra Pradesh, which actually was a result of one of the funding that they got from the Asian Development Bank and the World Bank. The focus was that you have to bring transparency in your third party spend or buying process. So they were told that you have to deploy a tool. So it was a very complex project. Fortunate to be part of that. So government also got that visibility towards the transparency. And if we talk about today, it is mandatory for every state government, every PSU to have their major spend routed through an electronic mode. That is one shift I have seen, wherein there was nothing. Today, everything is like mandatory even for government. And private organizations, especially the large organizations, multinational organizations, they have those tools available with them, which actually has automated their process, has given them a great visibility, and has helped in building a bigger relationship or a larger relationship with the suppliers. So technology shift is one, or you can say it's a digitization thing. Second, there was a tag given to a procurement person, back in 1960s, 70s, went up to 2000, wherein their idea was that sourcing person is actually a purchaser whose job is to go out and get the material for you. That's all. They don't add any value. It was considered to be an admin job. And in fact, I'm sure you will agree, a lot of jobs that were getting published many years ago, they used to call it, administrative officer, and one of the role for the person was a procurement person or a purchaser, right? Now things have shifted from there, wherein from a normal transactional job, it became slightly operational. Later, I would say in 2010 and beyond, it became a strategic sourcing or strategic procurement kind of a role, wherein this function started becoming an important part of the organization, defining how the spend should be done. Because spend is not just the money that you end up giving to a third party. It comes with a lot of asks and compliance also, especially for public company, because now you are spending money of someone who has invested in your company. So a lot of compliance angle come into that. Today, if we talk about where the procurement or sourcing has reached, it has become a part of the value chain. I won't say that this is happening in all the industries, all the companies, but yes, it has reached to a level wherein it is part of the value chain. And two things I would mention to support that. One, if you look at most of the aggregator model today, which is an app-based model, be it the car business or the electronic commerce business or any service that comes to your home with the press of a button on a phone, everything is supply chain. If you see, right, there is a platform, someone has to sell, someone has to buy. So that supply chain as a whole has picked up big time, wherein the value of sourcing, procurement, supply chain has become more and more stronger. And the other shift that has happened very recently is after COVID. And a lot of people are talking about how sourcing can help, because this was the time when everything was shut down. In most of the countries, companies were either operating partially or with a small fragmented space. So procurement or sourcing was one function which actually helped in running the organization by bringing that material or service, right? They were finding ways how to solve this. So that has changed fundamentally, the perception about, the sourcing process or the procurement process further. So this is how I see digitization is one. Second, the role evolvement that has happened from just transactional to a very strategic, and then the value chain. broadly, these are two major things I would say has changed. Then yes, we can talk about later, how the KPIs have changed, how, sourcing or procurement adds more value to the organization. But
Right.
these are two fundamental shifts, I
Right.
would
So
say.
that P2P to S2P, the shift, that basic shift
That's
is what
right.
you're talking about.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Before we move on to specifics, I wanted to touch upon one idea. In the industrial era, if I may box it out, so we are in the knowledge era, in the E era, but in the industrial era, procurement role was, like you mentioned, pretty much about negotiation. It is about price. That was the role of procurement. And one of the thoughts that came across is that in the knowledge era, where this information is available much more abundantly to the buyer, and possibly the buyer is far more informed than the individual seller, because the buyer has access to multiple sellers, so he's getting inputs from multiple sources, while the salesperson is or the sales organization is restricted to whatever they are doing. The role of procurement in the way it was defined is going to end, because negotiation is not going to be the prime driver, because in the physical world, reducing the cost by a few pennies makes a difference in the ultimate, but in the digital world it doesn't really work that way. And that will sort of lead to a new kind of role and new kind of skill set. So where do you stand on that?
So, great question. So, I would say, uh, you know, uh, most of the people still think procurement or sourcing, whatever you may say, in simple terms, sourcing is basically the, upstream process in the overall cycle wherein, we go and search for suppliers, we do, the pricing negotiations with them, we put contracts in place and then hand it over further to the business or operations to manage, all those transactional activities like purchase order, supplier creation. That is actually procurement. So that differentiation has come, very clearly now. Earlier, people used to say sourcing, procurement, purchasing, everything is same. No, it is not same. Everything is different. Now, coming on to your question, I still think that most of the salespeople, they think the role of procurement or sourcing is only to do the negotiation, and that is the only skill that they carry, which is not true. If you look at what comes in the job description of a sourcing person today, it asks for multiple kind of skills one should have. Negotiation definitely is the fundamental thing that has to be there. If you are not a good negotiator, you cannot fit into the role. Then you just become a transactional person and at least should in the procurement function, right? So that is one thing. Now, along with that, other thing that is very, very important is how good a sourcing person is in doing the risk evaluation. When we talk about the risk evaluation, it is the financial risk, it's the commercial risk, it's the technical risk, operational risk, legal risk. All these risks need to be considered when a particular deal is being, evaluated. I mean, just getting a price from someone which is better than other does not help. The concept of total cost of ownership is something which does come into play, which a seller must know. And when it comes to the total cost of ownership, it is not just about what they are quoting makes a difference. They need to understand that there are a lot of other functions which are interconnected with each other, whose effort also need to be considered. Company strategy, policy, future plan also need to be considered in that. Uh, you know, I think the seller always think that the finance job is only to give budgets. No, their job is not just to give the budgets. Their job is to do the right allocation of the budget also and track that and match that, whether the forecast is matching with what has been delivered or not. So there is a cost element or a functional element that comes into play. A seller has to understand that there is a cost of transition also, right, from one supplier to another. So if they think that the buyer is buying something at $100 and I can give 5% benefit to him, they need to realize to get that 5%, it should not happen that the buyer has to spend additional 10% because there is a transition cost.
Right.
I'll give a very simple example. And I'll talk about, maybe ERP thing that you were mentioning earlier. There are multiple solutions, right? But is it really easy to change the ERP solution, right? Answer is no. One need to understand that it is not just the integration. First, check is evaluating the supplier on their technical capability as well as how secure is the information with them. We have to, think of the future plan. If as a buyer, I know that my company will be switching from one platform to another platform in next 2 years, I need to see whether the seller is providing that sort of, solution to me, which is flexible enough. To build further on this example, what we have in our organization is a very, very simple procure to pay tool and, the RFP tool, which has been procured looking at where we might be 10 years from now. First of all, is it 100% on cloud? Because, if you are on cloud, definitely you have more leverage, to make changes in your solution. How good is their code and flexibility in the code, right? If we ask them to make a change, does it come with a small cost, large cost? Can it be done quickly or does it take time? Those elements are not something which procurement is deciding. But procurement is, the face to the supplier, and they are passing on that communication to them because it is coming from, multiple other partners in the organization. So that is the other thing. Seller also need to understand, as a part of the cost of transition, is there a customer satisfaction also further getting impacted? And I'm not just talking about the customer within the organization. The organization also serves further, other customers
Right.
also. Will there be a change in that? That's the other thing. They need to understand that sometimes, a company would fall under a particular industry type, which might have a different regulations for it altogether, right? Could be the tax regulation, the way, it has to operate in the country, those also matter. So they need to understand every customer is different. Their legal, structure is different. Their taxation structure is different. So those are also the people who contribute to this. Then what are, the processes and guidelines a company follows, that also matters a lot. And then, what are the compliance guidelines for this? I take an example. I've seen it so many times, someone would come to me for, selling maybe their marketing services or BTL services, below the line services, saying, you are doing a ground level activation with, a partner. We know that you pay this particular amount to them. I can give you 2% discount. Now I tell them, see, to bring you on board, even if there is no major compliance risk I see, understand my, process that I have to change in my organization. And they say, no, sir, you just have to sign a contract and we are okay with any terms and conditions that you have for contract. So we'll save your time. Fine. You are saving some time for me for contract signatures. But then I have to onboard you on my system also, right? For many people, they still think onboarding is like putting the name of the person and email ID and phone number. No, that is not. The team who's doing your onboarding, they also will evaluate you as a partner for the risk. Then the category under which I am putting you is also something which has to be evaluated. In my BTL, if I'm making a touch point between my customer and you, or if I'm sharing some data with you, I have a another function to evaluate you whether my data is secure with you or not. So there is a cost for everything that is there, right? So your 5% sometimes become a much bigger cost for me as a part of the transition. So that mindset has to change. That sourcing is not just negotiation. They come with a lot of additional skills like commercial skills, as I said, legal skills. So sourcing person actually wear many hats in the organization. Traditionally, that was not how it was being looked upon, or I would say even sourcing people did not have all kind of skills. Today, the world has changed, right? We represent an organization wherein multiple functions are connected with us, and we are there to balance the deal between, the organization and, the seller here. So
Right.
that's how I see it.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's this is a nice place to actually connect it back to the multiple verticals you have worked in your career. It's time for a short break. Vrish was explaining how critical it is for vendors to understand the buyer's real asks. I asked him how are these expectations different when purchases are being considered for, say, marketing and then technology. Even in tech, how does the process for buying telecom products differ from software? We are getting in depth. Stay with us. You are listening to a Business Podcast Network original. Podcasting is the fastest growing content marketing opportunity which is untapped.
We can help you craft your audio strategy and help leverage the wide reach and easy streaming capability that the smartphone penetration provides. It is easy, it is powerful and personal. Talk to us to find out how podcasting can help you build your brand and reach out to your targets like never before. Write to us at bpn@bizcast.in. That is bpn@bizcast.in. Business Podcast Network. Podcasts end to end.
Welcome back. I'm Shubhanjan Sarkar, your host and founder of PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. Right before the break, I asked our guest, Vrish Bhan Vaidya, Head of Strategic Sourcing and Supply Chain Asia Pacific Uber, what are the key differences in the approach while purchasing marketing services as compared to, say, technology? Let's find out. Let's touch upon how the procurement process, the purchase process, the buying process is different when it is categories like marketing and it's technology. In technology, it's telecom versus software, professional services, and so on. So if you can touch upon some of the industries that you have worked in and actually outline how the process differs between them.
So I think the reason for having various categories and how the spend is actually categorized in the organization, because the approach varies. And your question is very, very right, that what is the difference? Yes, first of all, there is a difference how a technology procurement is done versus a professional category or professional services procured versus marketing. Everything has a different sort of customer base also, both internally and externally, who are the actual users of it. So when a procurement person is working on a particular project under a category, the set of questionnaire that they ask, the set of evaluation criteria they will put in for a supplier selection or a deal evaluation would definitely vary. Taking an example of, say, technology sourcing, whenever we talk about technology sourcing, in most of the cases, either the solution or the application will sit on the client system, or as we call it, on-premise solution, or it will be coming through cloud, which means there is a connect happening between the buyer's system as well as the seller system. And when we talk about technology, the biggest risk arise there, because now the seller would have access to buyer's system. So what kind of risks are there in terms of the security? Can they get into our system and hack it? On the other hand, is their platform good enough, which will always remain up and running? If the platform goes down, is there a manual push someone has to do and inform, the buying organization or, the person in operation that, our platform is down? Or is it smart enough, which will generate? These are other things that are being looked upon in the technology. Then definitely the roadmap of, the buying organization also has to be understood. Where is it that this company would like to be in next 5 years in terms of, the technology? One of the example, I talk about my company, and we keep telling to the suppliers also, we are a zero asset company. The philosophy of the company is we don't want to build data centers. We don't want to have server racks in our premises, right? So if you are coming to us with a solution which might be, economical, maybe 80-90% economical, but then you are telling me to change my complete IT infrastructure. No, that will not work. So that's how technology procurement is very, very different. The SLAs that would be there in the technology are generally about the uptime of the system and the resolution that you provide and the data security that you have, right? When it comes to marketing, we have to understand what are the KPIs and goals that a marketeer has. Right, their job is basically not to just build a brand, but to get more customers also, have a better customer engagement also, and that involves a lot of data sharing also. Sometimes that here is my consumer base, can you build a strategy around that? So the type of risk now is not the technology risk, it's the data risk that is there. So the evaluation criteria would vary there, wherein we would be evaluating, a marketing vendor. What is the construct of their organization? How do they share their data internally? What kind of exclusivity we can demand? And in fact, you will see a lot of times, most of the advertisers will tell a marketeer, the team who's working on my brand building, make sure that they are exclusive and they don't work for any of my customer. Now, just by putting that in a contract does not help, right? You need to have that level of operational processes and trust also to see whether that is happening or not. Otherwise, if there is a gap in the marketing technology, then you can always end up losing customer, and your competitor will gain that.
Right.
Then you have to look at what is the ROI that you are getting out of a campaign, who can deliver, and what is the experience of a person. Maybe in technology procurement, you don't care about who's the engineer who's supporting you, but in marketing deals, it actually matters who is the person assigned to your contract and what kind of campaigns this person has done in the past. That's where a lot of interview process also happens, that who's the person that will be assigning to my account. On the professional services side, it's a very different thing, right? Wherein most of the things around SLA, because in professional services, what we look at, what is the engagement that buying organization would have, or maybe the operations team would have once the deal is signed. Can we get some solution wherein we don't have to do a lot of transactional stuff? Can the partner or can the vendor provide a solution which is automated enough, has good dashboards, they have a good backend team who can do the resolution of services, and when are they compliant enough as per the government regulation? Because in professional services, most of the spend that a company generally does is either on the contractual staffing or security staffing, or the workplace service, and these are very, very regulated things. There are a lot of government policies that are being put on the providers of these companies. So that's where we look at, are they legally compliant, do they follow all the regulations? So the approach towards every single deal varies, and that's where I would say that category model is something which most of the large organizations follow, because they want to build a strategy for the category, not just for one project.
Right. Would you be able to talk about two scenarios? One where a vendor you were keen to work with but did not for some specific reason. A lot of times you feel as a salesperson, I've got this deal in my bag. And then you figure out finally that somebody else has taken it away. A scenario where that has happened, and another scenario where you can talk about a vendor who made those extra efforts to understand or to customize to actually win a deal.
Sure. I'll give you one very recent example during COVID times, and honestly, we were quite successful in that. So when the COVID hit, sometime in the month of February, I would say, when business started seeing impact in our industry also, the volume of trips on the platform start going down, and suddenly government announced the lockdown. Now that's a situation wherein internally we were kind of deciding how do we kind of bring the rides back, how do we make our rides safe. So we were planning internally at our end, okay, can we look at putting sanitizers, can we have drivers wearing masks, can we put some kind of protection for these people, so that the trip becomes safer. So while we were doing this, a lot of products were thought of from our side also. So if you look at the safety screens which are put in the cars today, every other company is talking about the safety screen today, right? We in fact were the first company, as far as I know, who put the first safety screen. That was on 21st of March. We actually tested that product. And today, if I talk about, we have more than 125,000 installations done on our platform with the screens, right? So why we are particularly working with a particular supplier? We spoke to a lot of suppliers, right? That we are looking at something like a screen which has to be put in the car. It was very easy for some suppliers who understood, the requirement, came very, very quickly to us saying, oh, let's do a, acrylic screen and put it in the car. This will keep a driver, separate in the car, and, your ride will be safe. So when we asked for the cost, they gave us a cost. We thought, okay, let's see what other suppliers are doing. In between, we saw a couple of suppliers coming to us who started talking to us very differently. They said, sir, if I keep this cost of a particular screen, and if it gets damaged, right, during the trip, you will have to replace it. Looking at where the country is going through, wherein the lockdown has happened, number of trips are low, you will keep investing on it every month, right? So can we give you an option which is a much economical option to put, so that even if there is a damage, you actually cover, bring that new product and do that at a lower cost. Someone was actually thinking on the fare policy, how many trips would happen. So that is the kind of connect. Sometimes the supplier, when they start reading or understanding your business and start developing product accordingly, that works, right? So that is one of the reason why number of screens today are very, very high. We have the right partners who understand uh, you know how it works. They actually spoke to the riders, they spoke to the drivers. While we were doing our own market research, they also started talking to the actual users, that the screen has been put, do you think this is safe enough, what can go wrong, what changes need to be done. On the other hand, someone was having their standard product and was pushing for it. I have this product, this will last for 1 year. But they never realized that they have never spoken to the rider or driver who actually has to give a feedback. We are here to put safety in place and pay for it, but then if the end consumer is not happy, sorry, will not work. That is one example I would give. And second example, I would say that's slightly old, how someone kind of did better than everyone else. That was more of I would say driven from the buying side. I was actually leading that project. So we were doing a plan to move our contractual staff from one partner to another, and we have a significant amount of contractual staff. During my evaluation, I figured out that while there is a supplier who has given us or who is giving us their services of managing the contractual staff, we also have around 10 people managing this vendor, right? And why it is being managed? Because everything is manual. Someone has to test or check every single thing every single day, manually. So I came with this RFP wherein the ask was, we need a platform wherein a person sitting anywhere in the country can actually look at the compliance scorecard. They can figure out whether this worker is coming to office or not, right? So we asked for the automation there. And I know very well, when this RFP was floated, almost 80% of the supplier came back to me saying, and that was few years back, what you are asking for actually work for the permanent employees who spend such kind of money on contractual staff, who monitors whether they are coming to office or not. They will come and sign the register. Why do you want to monitor that? Why do you want to have a recruitment also done through a platform? I told them, I said, I have 10 people managing, just this. They said, oh, we'll give you a solution and we can reduce your headcount by 2. I said, I don't need a single person to manage it. Give me a platform. If it can work on the FTE, why can't it work for contractual staff? So I know there was a lot of pushback from the supplier that your demand is incorrect, that doesn't work. But then there were a couple of people who understood this. They said, if there is a tool which is working, how does it matter who's the end user for that? Whether it is a FTE or it's a contractual staff, right? It doesn't matter. It's just a human, and there's attendance, there's a recruitment, there is a life cycle management of the person, there is a help desk system in that. So it was like a employee management system. They termed it to contract staff management system kind of thing, right? So that's where I saw someone actually understanding what is the real pain and coming up with that solution. And today I can say such suppliers do come to me and they talk about their system. They say, we have done automation, we can do everything for you. And I'm like, 4 or 5 years back, I actually demanded that kind of stuff. And you guys were the one who were saying, this will not happen. Today, if you look at how contractual vendors are managed, there are a lot of portals, a lot of applications that have come wherein you can remotely track where the worker is. Their onboarding happens virtually. Their life cycle management happen, virtually. If a worker has a question, they can raise a ticket on the app. So from, manually managing a vendor today, it is an app-based thing.
Right.
So that's where, I see the viewpoint of a supplier also, right? Are they adopting? Are they open to change, So yeah, those are a couple of examples.
Basically, when a vendor gets to know that there is an opportunity, at what point do they get to know it? Because they get some intent data. Typically, by the time a buying intent is captured by some process, the buying process has moved significantly. So if you're looking at the buying cycle, out of 10-15 steps that are there for any buying decision, possibly the vendor gets a clue by the time the 8th or 10th step has already been taken internally. All your change management decisions, budgeting, allocation, and so on and so forth. So a lot of those things have happened. How can a vendor get into this process early enough? It is not a guarantee for success, but how do they know that I can start working with the opportunity before the opportunity actually is crystallized and is out there in the open? Because that's when everybody's on it.
Right. I would say, first of all, one need to understand that the sourcing philosophy or the timelines for sourcing are changing for most of the organizations today. So it's not like that you will do the same sort of purchase every year where the plan is fixed that, say, in the month of January I will plan that these are 20 or 30 projects I will be running because the budgets have come, and in the month of March I'll be floating a tender. It doesn't work like that anymore, right? There are few reasons for that. Sourcing team, the KPIs are also changing. Now sourcing is thinking of doing sometimes the multi-year deal also. So that concept of a project X will happen at a particular time only, no, that is not the case in all the organizations. Some organizations still have that operational. So when does a vendor need to come? I would say it's actually on the sourcing team. Whenever they are planning a project, they go and start searching for the suppliers that time in case they want to add. So there is a fundamental shift that has happened. For a buyer, they can come and present their capabilities at any given point in time as such, but then they have to understand that what are the priorities for this sourcing person or sourcing function or this organization, and when the next opportunity will come. Between that time, they ideally should keep studying or keep building that relationship with the buying organization by feeding them that what is changing at their end. That's how I typically see it. Sometimes it may be the right time when the supplier has come out and buyer is also planning to do something, and that's the perfect timing, but it may not work every time, right?
Right. When you talk of keeping in touch, so for example, if I have a software, I know I have built a software for the manufacturing industry, so I know my universe is of these 5,000 companies, so I sort of ensure that I'm in touch. It doesn't matter when the opportunity will arise, but I build rapport. What kind of value they can really bring to you? What is it that as a procurement professional you will welcome? What kind of frequency and what kind of material would you welcome? And what is it that you would rather not be inundated with?
I would say, that's based on my personal experience, how I see it, because I'm approached by a lot of suppliers on social platforms, sometimes, through some introductions and all, or through some forums, people will reach out. And most of the times I would give them the state of, what is our business doing right now? What are our expectations? And what is the current setup of, the product that they are trying to sell? So for me, someone who understands that, yes, this is not the right time, right? But then, they show their keenness to, keep the buyer updated. That is what, first of all, creates a bond. I've seen people who will say, no, give us a try. They don't want to understand that this is not a priority for a procurement person also. They also have to deliver certain things. So first time, the relationship breaks there itself. After that, even if you communicate every day or once in a year, doesn't matter, right? That clearly shows that you only have your agenda. You don't want to understand
Absolutely.
our agenda. On the other hand, I've seen, some great suppliers, some companies who understand that this is not the right time for this buyer or this organization to take your product or service. So whenever it would come, they will invite us, but then they will seek permission. Can I keep you updated once in a month or once in a quarter on the development at my end? And tell me, how do you want to get it? That I believe is the perfect way that they will keep you updated. I have enough examples of that. One of the example, definitely I can't name the supplier. The discussion is on for last 2 years, right? I reached out to this company a couple of years back saying, I want a particular, sort of a product. I will not name the product because, that's something I should not be talking about.
Okay.
I said, I want this for my safety during a ride. They said, yeah, that's a wonderful ask that you have. So we have this product today. I said, but you don't have, few things in that. They said, give me, some time. I'll come back with this. So by the time they came back with that, our priorities changed. I told them, our priorities have changed. We will not be taking this service now. Maybe, in next financial year. Definitely, they tried to kind of, convince that at least you should do a pilot free of cost and all. I was like, I can't engage operations team in that. They understood it pretty well. They said, fine, we understand that you have your own priorities. Can I keep you updated, once in a quarter, what is happening at our end, maybe through an email. And if you want to discuss it, maybe we can set up a meeting. I can tell you 2 years have passed. I get a quarterly update from them and I've seen how they have changed their product offering from that time to today. And the best part there is they are studying where our organization is heading towards, right? And they are building those features on their own. They are saying, while you may not be taking this service maybe for another 1 year, but good that you actually gave us that view. We are able to sell it to some, other players in the market, right? So that sort of engagement is what a buyer also looks at. Is the company really interested in, investing in what you want? Whenever the deal might happen, that's fine, right? But they are investing. And the good part is they are acknowledging that we showed them some path which has taken their business beyond. So in their mind, they still, have that sort of, courtesy or respect that they have not taken, but then they are helping us somehow, right?
Right.
So that's what I would say. So once in a quarter kind of a thing, if there is a, improvement in the product or if there is a variation, is a good way to communicate. If there's nothing that is changing, then I don't see, any reasons why they should be in touch. Yeah.
Sure. And if it is not about their product, but they want to share with you things that is around your industry, data that you may otherwise like, do you welcome that kind of inputs from vendors?
We do. I would say personally, I like talking to whatever is being offered. Sometimes, that gives you a lot of knowledge also where, the other players in the industry are heading toward, right? And how I can relate it to, my business. So personally, I like not just meeting, reading, if someone connects with me on LinkedIn, I may not, accept that invite, but I will still go and look at what is the offering, they might have. Right. So that helps me also to pitch a lot of solutions to my internal stakeholders also sometime,
Right.
That there is a change happening in the market. Can we look at making some shift in our procurement also?
Right. You designed a procurement profession development program.
I've done that a few years back. Yeah.
Okay.
That's right.
So if you want to update that program today, what are the key things that you will include into that?
One of the very, very important thing I do talk about is for a procurement person, till the time you have a sourcing acumen or a procurement acumen or a negotiation acumen, that's good to have. That will not be valuable to the company. You need to have that business acumen. So today, if I have to redesign that, I'll talk a lot about 360 degree. And in the 360 degree is know what your sales organization is doing, what your finance is doing. Sitting in silos and just driving your agenda, that will not make you successful. That will not make your function successful. And that will not take your profession from what you are doing today. So 360 degree for sure. And I definitely have been practicing this. I work very, very closely with sales organization. So today they help me in, driving my agenda. I help them in driving their agenda. One very simple example is if I know that I'm talking to a supplier at their management level or CXO level, can I pitch my company service to them? I just have to create that connect, right? The moment they say, yes, we are ready to explore, then okay, connect the sales guy and that, right? And same way, I have seen our sales team also coming to me a couple of times wherein their prospective customers are saying, can you connect us to your sourcing people because we also want to become your supplier? That's what the true 360 is, driving the organization agenda than your own agenda.
The Buyer Site Chat is brought to you by PitchLink, the buyer-seller engagement platform. PitchLink enables high-quality interactions between buyers and sellers through presentation and discussion modules. Sellers create personalized sales presentations and reach out to prospects through a non-intrusive, buyer-qualified engagement. PitchLink requires no installation or download and holds the entire repository of sales collaterals and buyer-seller conversation. Talk to us to know more about how you can engage with customers without intrusion. Call us on 650-847-5884. That is 650-847-5884.
Vrish, thank you so much. I really enjoyed, and honestly, I would love to come back to you and dwell deeper, because I think it's important to really talk in depth about the verticals, in depth about the practices, in depth about also projecting into the future where this profession is going to go, because that's going to be it's finally a 360-degree thing, right? So sales cannot sell unless procurement is happening, and vice versa. So I think the days of silos are over. I think days of collaboration are in, and today in the technology era, collaboration has become much simpler. So we should actually be able to do it very, very effectively. Thank you so much.
That's right.
And I'll look forward to talking to you again.
Sure. Thanks, Shubhanjan. Yeah.
Coming up in the next episode is an in-depth conversation with Tibor Shanto, Chief Value Officer, Rainbow Sales Solutions Inc. Tibor is a pre-discovery specialist driving conversion and pipeline creation via improved execution, and brings an insider's perspective on how information can be used to shorten sales cycles and increase close ratios. We have a fantastic lineup over the next couple of episodes, unraveling in depth how the real buyers buy. Stay tuned.
Thank you for being with us today on the Buyer Side Chat. This is the podcast of record for the buyer side journey. And those who know, that's the journey that matters. We hope this conversation helped you with insights that you can go and apply right now to your own value transaction process. See you in the next episode of the Buyer Side Chat.